So hey everyone, welcome to the first AI DIY live session. We're down here and ready. We can't wait to start up. And so we're going to start with a few introductions so that you know who's talking to you, but we're going to make it quick. Just name what you're up to. So you start, OC.
Yeah, I'm OC Abuji. I'm a software engineer focusing on just like good engineering principles surrounding LLM operations with URI data.
Yeah, I'm a similar position as OC, working at the same place. A lot of contracting stuff, a lot of integration of AI into data pipelines. Been a lot of fun over the past year with all the developments in the AI space.
And his name is
my name's Aiden Reese.
So I'm so glad you two are here. Really, all three of you. My name is Eli Wood, owner, operator of Black Flag Design. We're currently building, generative AI applications in healthcare, education, insurance sales. I'm working on more. So a lot of the way we think about our work is just iterating through a ton of ideas. So we just try to learn as much as possible. So I'm excited to be here with you guys.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm Uche Obuji, and also at URI, work with OC and Aiden. It's again, just a data architect. AI is all about data, and software engineer as well. And this podcast is all going to be about how you can basically take all the stuff you're hearing about AI, right? It's out there, it's abstract, someone else is doing it. Oh my goodness, this person announced this, NVIDIA announced this, Microsoft, Meta, whoever announced all this stuff. And you're like, okay, I'm reading all this news and it's like happening to me. And we don't want it to happen to you, audience. We want to be part of the happening. It's DIY, it's do it yourself. It's get your hands in there and figure out what's going on. We're going to be talking about how we tinker with AI. We'd love to hear from you about how you tinker with AI. And we just want to, be real. We want to be practical and, hopefully we'll have a lot of fun conversations about this thing that's happening to everybody. So yeah, let's just go ahead and swing into our first topic then. We're going to talk a little bit about, the Apple Intelligence. That was something really interesting that came about recently. And I know, Eli, you have a lot of thoughts about Apple Intelligence, so hit us with them.
I do. So I'm totally an Apple fanboy, admittedly. So I think whenever we're kind of talking about this subject, if you can kind of suspend your disbelief on that front, in case you're, Android diehards at all, I think you just have to make the assumption that it is going to be complementary to the user experience that Apple can provide. So if you start with that baseline, right, and then you look at what happened at WWDC, I think we're looking at the future of on-device local LLMs, the benefits that they bring for privacy, trust, transparency, will be made reality for 5 million iPhone 15 and up users, 30 plus million Apple devices with the M1 chip on board, because that's kind of the threshold, right, that they set, and really the whole reason that they moved to their new architectures. So I do think it's arguable that it will be beneficial to the UX, but there's a couple of interesting points that I noticed when looking at WWDC and that I just wanted to bring up, and maybe we can talk about. We'll flash up different graphics in post for people afterwards. So I think the first big thing that I wanted to just point out is the change in Siri and the visual representation of Siri.
Okay.
And I think it notions that a massive change in the way that Apple is thinking about artificial intelligence.
Right.
So today, right, when you activate Siri, it shows up as a circle or like a sphere kind of object.
little gradients floating around in it. Yeah.
And now you'll notice that Apple Intelligence on these M1 chips is much more of a fabric representation.
Right.
So it comes in from the exterior of the screen, insinuating that it's going to bleed into other places.
Like it's encompassing the whole device, and it's not like its own standalone little.
Their strategy is visible, and that decision alone.
Right.
It's going to bleed across device. It's on the device. It's embedded in the device. No longer is AI a part of Apple. It is fundamental to the strategy. And I think that's fascinating from a look and feel kind of perspective.
Yeah, I remember the early days of ChatGPT, the first time I was testing it out, I really thought about how is this going to be affecting personal assistants, thinking about Cortana, Alexa, and Siri. Obviously, it took a little bit before the companies were able to catch up and have that personal assistant be able to like kind of latch onto the whole device through development. But I was really thinking about like how this is going to really accelerate the personal assistant's power on your phone to really be a personal assistant instead of just something that can kind of just do voice commands.
Right, exactly. Like we've all been in that situation where you want to ask a follow-up question to Siri.
Right.
Yeah,
It's the best.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Can't do multiple things in a row.
Right.
So I think what's like evident in it is Apple is very famous for a white paper that came out in the late 80s, early 90s. It's called What Do Prototypes Prototype? Have you all ever read it or seen it?
No.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating white paper
It's a good
where,
one, yeah.
you know, it talks about sort of this three-headed hydra of what you can learn by prototyping products. And one is look and feel,
Right.
and one is the way that of the tool or the technology in someone's life, and then finally implementation. And Apple's like thesis through all of their research on like the initial GUIs was that if you strike the right balance between all of those three things, you're working on what's called an integrated prototype.
Okay.
And I believe that all of the decisions that they made with Apple Intelligence equal up to that. Right. So we've talked about look and feel and this like move from a circle to what I'm calling a fabric approach.
Right.
You know? And then on the implementation side of things, you know, we're very clearly seeing the ways that Siri, you know, will now evolve, helping rewrite content, respond to text messages, delete emails, you know, everything that they notioned that in WWDC shows that they've really honed in on really clear use cases, which is
Right.
you know, dope. And then from the implementation side of things, the M1 chip is like the obvious like thing that allowed them or enabled them to achieve this on device with good battery life.
Right.
Because that's
Yeah.
the limiting factor, right?
Yep.
Of
Lower energy consumption, etc.
Yeah, that's becoming a bigger and bigger issue with AI. Like these past few months, that's become a real blaring issue for OpenAI specifically with the amount of power that they're using.
And I just got an email this morning from one of our clients asking about a sustainability position.
It's a very common. It's become one of the, especially you know we're here in Denver, Boulder metro area, and one of the most common things in the last few months as that concern has been growing. That if I mention I work with AI, people are like, oh, like did you hear that it uses X amount of power from whatever
And water.
Power and water. Yeah,
from the most recent headline that they've seen, and it's definitely. Technical people always knew that, these GPUs that used to be, the bane of the environment from the cryptos perspective have just been bent toward AI instead. But that's starting to become evident to everybody involved. And Apple has obviously a very sustainability. They want to push themselves as a sustainable brand, and that's going to be something really important for them.
Well, it's just kind of counter to AirPods, for example. They just trash that shit.
Yeah,
none of it gets recycled whatsoever.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
So they're like,
it's very much a front, but and I picked up my Android phone earlier when you mentioned Android diehards might not like this, and I'm definitely strong on being critical of Apple, and they do deserve a lot of criticism for a lot of their sustainability practices for sure, but they also are. It's not a black and white picture there. I think it is a very gray picture. They are doing a lot of really cool stuff for sustainability. You mentioned the M1 architecture that they've been moving to, which is ARM based, and we run a server, for example, for LLMs now that we swap to instead of using essentially a gaming PC.
Right. And
the power consumption is literally at load half or less, and at idle a tenth or less. That's significant, especially if that propagates to the rest of the industry. One thing you mentioned earlier was Apple's another thing that Apple really likes to focus on is privacy and how the model being local to the device is important from that privacy angle, right? But my
paramount.
Totally, and it should be. People should care about that, and I agree with I agree with being mad about that. I don't like my data being used for whatever any more than the next person. That being said, I do understand, as I understand it, they will still go out to, I believe, OpenAI's services for more complex queries that the on-device features and functionality can handle. Do you have I haven't looked that deeply into it though. Do you have an understanding of how that's going to work?
Yeah, a little bit. And the way that they're positioning that to preserve the privacy and like transparency front is that those actions where you may say, why are you sending my photo data to the, to the APIs are for content moderation, like looking for child pornography and looking for illicit content. And so the way that they're positioning a lot of those use cases that do invariably need to move off device are for consumer protection. And so to be determined, but I think as you see their like multi-step iteration rollout, most likely in 2025, because Apple Intelligence should be coming this fall, right? October 2025, but
That'll be right. iOS, that'll be right, I think.
Yeah, I believe so. And so then 2025, you're going to see multi-step Siri interactions that I think you'll start to see it intelligently determine, what part of the runnable map needs to actually go out of the device. Yeah.
So from a DIY perspective, and obviously it's really important for us to also see what's coming down and getting ready for it. Are there things that you think that we can, that people will start to either pay attention to, learn about, or are there ways to start to get a handle on the sorts of things that Apple Intelligence will bring to our devices that we can start to, is there any experimentation that's possible now or preparation for experimentation?
I mean, I think signing up for the developer beta, it would be the first move, and then really getting hands-on with the platform APIs that they're going to provide, because they're intuitively going to be informed by all of the research that Apple has done on use cases and profiles, right? So like the moment we can get into the developer beta and start playing around with the platform APIs, I think that's just the first move. And try to recreate some existing use cases. Like, we've got an email drafter, we've got our Discord bot, we've got some other things that we're doing that let's see if we can recreate those behaviors in a native experience. I genuinely think the native iOS AI experience will be a step change in the way that people use AI on a phone. Like today, it's just ChatGPT app.
Yeah, it really is.
Really?
Just how you open up, you can just ask.
Yeah, like there's alternatives.
Yeah, that and the the old school assistants, but again, the old school assistants.
We're calling them old school assistants when they're there for a reason.
Well, yeah, no, that's exciting. We'll continue to, of course, touch on that and come back to it. And one thing I forgot to mention at the beginning, audience, is that we're going to start with some of these hands-on what's happening new topics. And then we're going to, like, towards the end, take a philosophical step back and talk about some bigger picture thing, more general, broader around AI. But we want to just dig into a few of the things that are emerging, right away. OC, I think you wanted to talk about Microsoft's GraphRag release, which was recently out. You might want to start by kind of explaining what GraphRag would be.
Yeah, I think even we might want to go back all the way to naive RAG, as it's called, which is the RAG for more technical audience members that you're probably more familiar with. So the main problem that GraphRag is trying to solve, retrieval augmented generation is trying to solve, is that LLMs, AI as we often call them, don't have any intrinsic knowledge that is necessarily trustworthy. They were trained on some amounts of data and they can sometimes recall that accurately, but sometimes they'll just make things up. Sometimes the data that you need them to operate on or repeat back to the user just isn't in their training set. Or sometimes they just make things up. I think I said that already. And RAG is a solution to try and curb that with real data that you can trust and even cite and source. So the idea is that you take some corpus of data that you want the LLM to be able to operate with. You turn it into a bunch of chunks. If we take the data that we're using as a book, for example, we might break that into a bunch of chapters and then even further break that into a bunch of paragraphs inside of those chapters. Once we've got those little chapters, we're going to take those and we're going to do embedding on those, which is we're going to essentially throw a whole bunch of math at them with a really simple LLM. turn those into a vector representation that is essentially, there's a semantic encoding where it describes all of the, it tries to describe all of the bits of that encoding in high dimensional vector space. Sounds like a lot of nonsense, but
It's because it is.
yeah, it kind of is. And there is a lot of black box magic happening here that is still under pretty heavy research. Semantic encodings are a pretty reliable way to associate, for example, the word cat and kitten in a way that is a lot more concrete than just trying to say, you know, both of them start with a k sound, or both of them, you know, both of them have a vowel in the middle or something like that. No, both of them refer to domestic house
Right.
cats.
It's the concept of it.
Mm.
And then you take those chunks that came from the data and you give it to the LLM and they can complete the query. But this isn't just regular RAG. This is GraphRag, right? So what's the distinction?
Normally, we take those embeddings and we get those vector embeddings, we put them in a database, we search for them, and then we give them to the AI in order for it to be able to talk intelligently about something. In the book example, that way it's able to, you ask it a question about something was in the book, it's able to go through, check what was in that book, and pull it out and repeat it back to you in a way that's a lot more useful than if it was just trying to memorize the book, essentially. But GraphRag is a higher level concept. Normally, in normal RAG, we just store all of those embeddings kind of flatly in just a big database. We just put all of those in a big old database, and whenever we need to search for something for the LLM to repeat back, we just look at the whole database and just pluck out the thing that seems to have the most matching semantic keywords there. The user asks about cats, it gets back the chapter that has kittens in it. GraphRag is really interesting because it's using knowledge graphs in order to try and augment and empower and more greatly empower that searching functionality in order to be a lot more powerful and a lot more capable of not just matching stuff like word similarity like we described with cat versus kitten, but also going up to what they call entity relationships,
Or
connections.
recognition.
Okay.
Entity recognition and then relationships, yeah.
So it's more of almost more of like phrases or little sentences that it's able to string together the beginning of.
Sentences that encode logic, I think.
Oh, interesting. So it uses like the logic of a sentence to kind of figure out the structure.
As well as individual components from around the chunk and figuring out the relations between
Oh, interesting.
those, and then encoding those into a graph structure, which is a bigger, more complex and more structured data set than just packing things flat. And then one really cool thing that Microsoft was doing, making a bunch of hierarchical kind of overviews of what's inside of that database. So first level is maybe a summary of the entire book, just a short summary of the whole book, everything that's in it. Then there's a summary of stuff in each chapter, and maybe connections that has between bits around those chapters.
So are each of these levels represented with graphs?
I believe so. I'm not a data scientist for sure.
Okay, sure.
I do think so.
But yeah, I think that they're all subgraphs within a bigger graph.
Interesting.
So if I can just kind of tie that all together with like an example. So I guess you could take the script of Star Wars, for example. Hopefully, everyone in the audience saw Star Wars. And you can either do naive RAG, which is you just kind of feed it the whole script, some long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
Splits it every 30 minutes.
Right. Splits it every 30 minutes and says, here's what actually happens. And then if you ask, if you ask a question such as, I did Luke Skywalker join the rebellion or something like that, the LLM has to read and understand those correct chapters and get you back a response. But with GraphRag, it sounds like what you're saying is it absorbs the knowledge in there and says things like, Darth Vader killed Luke Skywalker. Oh no,
And
stormtroopers
related to this.
Yeah.
and,
Yeah, okay,
related to I don't know, whatever.
Instead of just grabbing like
Ben, yeah.
instead of just Luke makes the decision. It goes for context throughout the entire movie.
Building context and
strings them
logic.
together.
Right. And so now the LLM doesn't have to read through and understand that logic. The logic is given to the LLM so it can answer the question by saying, okay, Darth Vader's in charge of stormtroopers. Stormtroopers killed Luke's aunt and uncle. And then it can say, oh, that's why Luke is so angry and joined the rebellion, right? And it answers the user's question. Is that a decent summary?
Yeah, no, that's a great summary.
Okay.
I think it ties pretty closely into the way I was describing that book example, but yeah, it's good. It's a good like parallel way to think about it. Microsoft was in the paper using some, at that point, re-ranking functionality where they would then get back some of those high level summaries, including some of the information inside of them, and have another LLM call make some summaries of those and re-rank those. it's useful stuff, but I don't think it's as far as the white paper goes. The more interesting part was definitely the graph specific storage of that vector information, and that's why I definitely want to focus on. One other really interesting aspect that was touched on a little bit in the paper, but I think that is really useful and that I've seen discussed a lot, is that the summaries that we've been discussing there, like you all were talking about, are fairly high level and human readable. We do make embeddings for those out of those big high dimensional vector embeddings, but it's also, we also still store those as text as well. And that's a really, those can be really good and useful even outside of the context of LLMs, just for understanding of a document, even without querying an LLM in the first place. So this technology might even escape LLM specific usage and be something that's useful for just scientific paper reading.
Right.
Was an example I saw that seems like it would be a really, really useful place.
Yeah, it's like you're going into a very large paper for a specific topic, then like this kind of technology would be able to help you extract that while kind of separating off a lot of the other stuff that you meanwhile have to spend a lot of time reading through.
And then as a bonus, you can also use it with an LLM and ask an LLM questions about the paper, as I'm sure we've all uploaded something to ChatGPT to ask questions about.
Interesting, yeah.
So you can do both, which is really nice. Because one thing about normal RAG is that it's just that flat pack of information. It's just a bunch of chunks in a big database generally, not really something that you as a human can understand the structure of.
Right.
I know Perplexity is coming under fire a lot lately with like pages and copyright stuff. They're a really good example too if people are interested in like really understanding the application of knowledge graphs. Perplexity, whenever you conduct a search, has a couple of things that they present back to you that are like groups of sources that the answer was based on.
Yeah.
They have inline citation as well.
Nice.
And so Perplexity, the way that they're able to achieve that is by employing a graph-based structure. But they took an outside-in approach where they looked at the scientific community first and said, there's already a concept of what's called citation graph that exists in the peer review space to understand if somebody's had your idea before. Am I rehashing old territory? Am I actually making a unique finding? And that was all contained within citation graph databases. And so they looked at citation graphs to contrive their graph strategy that allows them to do inline citation. Because, if anybody has tried to attempt inline citation based on RAG, it's very difficult. But you have to go and embark on the graph strategies, I think, to get there.
No, that's a good practical touch point on it. Microsoft GraphRag, I'm sure we'll revisit this topic again. And, but yeah, Perplexity is a way to just start thinking more structured about like search results and LLM query results. No, thanks for that, Llama.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and definitely one thing to keep in mind there is that, knowledge graphs, you've been talking to me about knowledge graphs for years now, even before the transformer revolution where, that spawned stuff like ChatGPT. It's just yet another really interesting example, in my opinion, of old school data science and computer science and mathematics finding yet again further interesting use now that we've got some interesting tools.
Old dog in my language.
New trick. Totally.
So cool. Well, we have one more in terms of new tech we want to dig into it. And you've been looking into, this is hot off the press just this week. Meta just released their new, you take it away from there.
Yeah, they just released their 3.1 Llama model. Yeah, one of the biggest significant things coming out of it is their massive parameter, 400 billion parameter, which is
5,
which is way beyond any of the other open source platforms out there. And a lot of people on the internet are asking, what's the point of this if I can't put it on the computer? Well, it's just, from what it's looking like, it's just a one step closer to having like a commercial grade AI that's comparable to GPT-4 that a lot of corporations that are concerned about security might be able to employ in their own work.
And for reference, GPT-4 is rumored, because OpenAI is not very open. GPT-4 is estimated rumored at 1.76, I think was the number I read, trillion parameters, making it about 3.5 to 4 times the size of this new higher size Llama 3.1 model.
I do just want to mention, especially from the DIY perspective, just this morning, I saw on Twitter a guy who had like two MacBook Pro somethings, both with 128 gig of RAM, and he's running 405B at Q4. So you can sort of do what's called quantization, which is you reduce sort of the physical way the numbers are stored. You lose a little bit of that accuracy and fidelity, but you're able to put the whole model.
Yeah, oftentimes it's worth that offset of like conserving memory.
Yeah.
I've seen the comparison a lot of times to JPEG compression, like image compression, basically.
Yeah, that's
If you don't compress the image, it fills your whole hard drive, but and it's
It's normally not for the technical folks. Again, we're at 16 point are generally floating point 16-bit numbers, or where models are normally their parameters are normally stored. But the 4-bit quantization takes that down from 16 floating points down to just 4.
Compressing the memory a lot as well. Yeah. Still maintaining a good amount of the quality that you're looking for in that big. Obviously, when you compress it farther, you always lose a little bit, but usually that offset is almost always worth it for the amount of memory that you're going to be saving. Which leads me to the next
Especially
point.
in local context,
Yeah. So this is monumental because this is going to allow a lot of people to start playing with a model that's not as big as GPT-4, but it's definitely in the same playing field. So I mean, this is 2 or 3 days fresh. So I'm really looking forward to all of the stuff that's going to be coming out from all the people out there that are going to be playing with it. I know that we're going to probably try to play with it, over these next few weeks, especially when the quants start to get a lot smaller in memory. But really looking forward to that.
Something on this front that's come up for us is, we're big LangSmith fans. I mean, we employ it every project we do. In LangSmith and their playground now, I can test existing prompts in our products against different models, and across data sets, all just in a simple GUI that I think for anybody that's looking for avenues to kind of experiment with the way that the new Llama models compare to 4.0, 4.0 mini, and if you're trying to get somewhat rigorous about that, LangSmith has made leaps and bounds in their playground. So I would really encourage just spin up a free LangSmith account. You can go look at the new Llama model. You can run it against 4.0 mini. You can run it against others, and just compare it with simple prompts. And I remember 8 months ago, I had to build an Excel version of that had API tokens in it that would let me, create like a prompt workbench. And now LangSmith, for anybody looking to say like, well, how do these things compare? In 5 minutes, you could run a comparison and get started today. So LangSmith they're really hot after 40 million raised. They're making progress.
That tool must be so useful. I remember back when we first got our server got going, and we anytime we wanted to compare two models, a lot of times we had to load one model and then unload it and then load the new one and then and it's so hard to compare them side by side when they're not side by side, and it takes 10 minutes to swap them out. So a tool like that is something that I'd really look forward to.
And granted, in the cloud, I think on-device prompt workbenches are coming. I know people are playing in that space too.
Yeah, and what I'll also mention, Grok has been in trying
killing it. Huh?
So Grok is a company that basically they had hardware that's really good for the sorts of maths that we use in LLMs, and they're like, okay, now use it for LLM inference, and they're really trying to get people to recognize the value and speed of it. So they're doing a lot, including they are hosting Llama 3.1.
Yeah, so you get the context, but then you also get the Grok inferencing speed.
Right. You get crazy speed on it. So that's another pretty cool thing to look into. Well, wow, that's awesome.
Additional shout out to Mistral's models, which are also very interesting, but we don't even have time to get into them because we're currently on Llama 3.1.
But with Mistral, what's really interesting is we're finding that it's like really good at certain tasks. But then if we're extrapolating a wide context window, GPT-4o, GPT-4 are leaps and bounds in terms of the expected output.
Yeah.
That people for whatever reason, people tend to vibe with what 4 and 4.0 spit back to them more than a Mistral at least from what we see.
Yeah, no, I do think
Interesting.
that's definitely been the historical. I do think, however, things are changing a lot. So like Mistral just released large yesterday, I think. And actually people are some of the initial assessments are that Mistral large is actually looking better than Llama, than Llama 3.1, which is, three
Even-
times the size.
Yeah, that Mistral large is 70 billion compared to Llama 3's the big version of Llama 3's
That would be
45
yeah,
billion.
more like 6 times. Yeah.
Every time I say it, I'm like,
Yeah, that's a lot of that's a lot of bees.
But I genuinely think like we want to see the trend go to less contact, less energy consumption,
Yep.
get things on devices, and y'all were some of the first people I ever shook hands with in Denver that were like on device all the way.
Right.
We're in it, we're building with it. And all signs point to it.
yeah, the entire industry, like that's where it has to funnel. I mean, like memory cost has to go down, and then quality cost has to go up. So, like every few months, like we take another step. I mean, 2 days ago we took another step. So,
A lot of people ask, like, well, are y'all doing training? Are you doing tuning? Are you trying to make your own models? And we're like, no, resoundingly, I would much rather let all of those behemoths duke it out.
Yep.
And then we just leverage their millions and millions of dollars of research to orchestrate amazing experience.
yeah, to actually apply all the work that they've been doing. Yeah.
AI DIY.
Exactly.
We're use the tools that are available to us. Not necessarily always trying to be the new toolsmith.
Exactly.
Not that we're not opposed to making new tools.
So, and we'll be talking a lot about that. Yeah, and I'm gonna shift the context. I'm gonna shift the context geographically, et cetera. We've been talking about all the hot new technology coming out, and we have only scratched the surface. I mean, new foundation models from Apple as well, and yeah, there's so much that's going on.
Oh yeah.
We know, right? There's so much we didn't even talk about. But I do want to kind of take us on a bit of a journey because I actually just came back from West Africa, from Nigeria, Lagos. There's a conference, Pycon, Nigeria. I got the T-shirt. So Nigeria, a little city down by the sea called Port Harcourt is where I got my first personal computer, joined a lot of other people who were like just experimenting with computers and AI back then, the 80s. Yeah, gray beard. That was one of the things that we were really interested in. Back then we would just call it plain natural language processing, very primitive stuff, but always been interested in that. And there's always been that hunger and interest, so I want people to understand that, Africa, the global south is not a complete backwater that people might think. So it's really important for me to go down to that conference, talk to people. It's a Python conference. So Python programming language is very, very popular in AI technology in the first place. So there were a lot of people talking about AI, including some cool uses like preventing theft in agriculture. I use vision models to see who's coming in and stealing the corn harvest that could ruin this farmer, or identify diseases of blight, weather pattern analysis, other things that farmers. I mean, improvements to agriculture in a place like Nigeria, just kind of, the leverage is even more. When you think of the food waste, like in the West, we have a little bit of gap and buffer. We don't have that much, right, in Nigeria. So these are things that really, really affect people's lives. And there are people out there, a lot of young, next generation of really very impressive, young developers who are working on this. There's a startup culture, and it's really exciting to me because I'm going to confess one thing. Even though I'm here at AI DIY, I work in AI every day, I've been interested in AI since I was a teen, I do also have an element of I've got to take everything with a pinch of salt, a grain of salt, in several ways. First of all, as a technology overhype, right? Large language models are glorified parrots, right? They take everything that we've said, chop it up, and they basically regurgitate it to us. There are ways to make them more like that. RAG is one example, tool calling, things like that. But ultimately, the bottom line is that's what they are. And if you don't think intelligently, but if you don't think clearly about that's what they really are at the basis, you run into all sorts of traps trying to move them and wondering why they're not working for you the way they should. So that's when
We're speculating into the future and presuming that AGI is just 10 months away.
Right,
AGI is 6 months away.
Yeah, and there's also an element of skepticism that I have from the perspective of, coming from a country and a part of the world where technology has not always happened, to our benefit. Let's put it that way, right? So, I mean, just the Industrial Revolution. I mean, I could go on for hours about this, right? But just one quick good thing the Industrial Revolution did start with the good, right? Mechanized agriculture, and all of a sudden we can have the population boom. Remember back in the 1800s, Malthus says that everyone's going to starve in a few decades, right? Yeah, I remember that. It did great periods, I'm telling you. Yeah. Malthus is saying we're all going to starve, etc. Mechanized agriculture, nitrogen fertilization invention, boom, great, right? Industrial Revolution, thank you, allowed us to grow to our 10 plus billion, but a downside, right? Climate change, right? So I guess that's happening to us. So we in Africa, etc., we're on the sidelines, right? And it's happening to us. And now the climate change is there. I mean, Lagos is hotter than ever. The water is rising more than ever, and everything that's happening to us. So my perspective is that we cannot just keep letting this sort of stuff happen to us. Even with the bits of skepticism that I have about AI, to me, it's important for us to be involved, for people from the global south to be involved, to be out there, to be working on it, to be conscious, to be keeping up with the technology and not being left behind. And again, not just letting it happen to us. So that was a really important perspective that I was trying to build on. There.
Well, if I can just celebrate your point of view, I believe the last report I read was that the largest human content moderation team for OpenAI is in Nigeria.
Really? Okay.
I believe so.
Wow.
And so
doesn't surprise me.
Right.
So
it could be in maybe Nairobi instead of Lagos. It could be in Kenya, but. I believe it is in Africa.
It's their largest enough somewhere, Yeah.
Yeah, it's their largest content moderation team. And
Right.
to your point, historically, when people think of Africa, it's always been a super extractive relationship.
Yes, yeah.
And it's been perpetuated into today.
Yeah.
And so what you're doing out there, rallying people, giving talks, Pycon Nigeria, I mean, it would be a dream to plug into the network and get people involved in projects that we do, because I believe that so much of the actual really good products that are built will be considered as local solutions to global problems.
Right.
Or, the inverse.
Right.
There's going to be global solutions to local problems, but they very rarely are by the community for the community, right? And they tend to miss the mark.
Yeah.
So we have to start at the local environment, whether it's agricultural theft. I've got a former business partner, shout out to Arjun in India, doing small business loans for independent farms in India.
Nice.
Those kind of people that are willing to go out there, embed in a community, and employ and apply AI with the community input. I mean, I think we're going to see teams of 2 or 3 doing amazing stuff.
Yeah.
Be it in Nairobi, Lagos, the Philippines, the Middle East,
the whole global
and
south.
with so few resources on the ground. We've been connecting with a few people now that Uche made those connections, and just some of the incredible things people are doing with CPU only inferencing with AI stuff is astounding. And when that we take for granted that worst case scenario, we can't use local knowledge for this. Okay, just go hit OpenAI. That's just not feasible if you're working on really tight developing country margins for your business.
OpenAI does not price for Africa, right? They don't price for Africa and energy.
That's because they're extractive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Totally. And so I'm really anticipating some massive innovation in efficiency and all that sort of thing from these sorts of markets.
Yeah, and I mean, for all these big companies, it's a bad look. All that news has been going viral these past few months. I mean, honestly, a lot of these companies do care a lot about their stock value, and so that kind of news story is going to be detrimental to them.
We were just talking about how Apple has a big, they sustainable, right?
Yeah.
But I think, this might sound glib, but this is where I get very heavily inspired by art and creative projects. And you look at the creative industries, I mean, Africa is a leader.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They lead the way in culture.
Yep.
What's trends in Nigeria, trends in the US, rap and hip hop 5 years later.
Yep.
So if you kind of take that, kind of positioning of Africa is a leader in the global conversation and in the global culture. And you look at, projects like what are you familiar with like Olafur Eliasson? He's like a famous artist that does a lot of light and color type of work.
Sounds like you are.
Yeah, it's really cool stuff.
He's got one that he calls like solar blooms. And so he deployed hundreds of thousands of small solar panel light devices that people can wear around their neck. They can hang in their homes. In areas, I believe in Africa, struggle with power consistency. And so, my mind starts to go towards art and creative projects of like, what if you deployed like a Rabbit V1 in those contexts and give the proper infrastructure to be able to have connectivity? What's going to emerge out of that is going to be radically different than giving Rabbit V1 to a bunch of people in San Francisco. And I think ultimately you're going to find much better applications for it.
No, that's not glib at all. In fact, I'm so glad, to wrap up this sort of retrospective, so glad you mentioned that, because actually I had a session in which I spoke to the people, and there will probably be video about it. I got really passionate with them. And what I was saying is that, look, I've spoken to you guys. I've spoken to some of you guys about the tensor calculus behind, steering large language models. I spoke, fine tuning for local Nigerian languages. You guys are smart. You're on it. You're hungry. You have a DIY mentality. Now look what's happening in culture. Yeah, exactly. So I mentioned, look what's happening in culture. Exactly what you said. Music, Nollywood, fabric, etc. We need to take that attitude in technology that we're already taking in culture, and that was my rallying cry to a lot there, because I was kind of a bit of an elder statesman. A lot of the audience was younger than me. So I do hope that message carries. And I do want to say that at AI DIY, we'll be sharing some of the conversations that I had while I was there and some other content, related to Pycon Nigeria, because I really want people to understand Africa is not going to be on the sidelines for this.
That's Uche telling me to hurry up and edit those.
Oh, So this is man, these are great conversations,
Totally.
and I want to actually take one big step back. And like I said, I do like to give us one big picture topic, and I think we all agree on that, which is I want us to think a little bit about artificial intelligence. Intelligence, right? It's artificial something, and that something is intelligence. So I've always thought that it helps to think about how is artificial intelligence going to affect our lives, and how do we have a DIY attitude towards artificial intelligence by, first of all, thinking, what is intelligence? How is it going to evolve and develop? And what does the artificial part mean to it? So I'm just curious, just more of a philosophical thought on, what do you think of intelligence? How would you, define it, especially with artificial intelligence in mind?
I mean, I have a brief story that I think illustrated what I think AI actually means to people, or intelligence means to people in this context. Back in 2021, I come from a family of a small business of plumbers. I plumbed from 13 to 18.
Oh, wow.
Doing water wells and fixing pipes and digging trenches and things. And in 2021, Texas froze over, and had a huge kind of cataclysmic type of freeze. I mean, -8 in places that had never seen that kind of stuff. And so went home, started picking up a wrench and getting into the truck with my family and helping our community, in 2021. Wow. And the phone would not stop ringing. I mean, we were planning our jobs for the day, and it's just it got to the point where we unplugged it.
Wow.
And I was like, that's fucking money on the table. Just straight up. I was like, every time we're not picking up that phone, we're not making money, and I like making money. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so just in half a day, I was like, hey, I can be better utilized employing some automation that will enable us to reach all of these people. And so through just a couple of small moves, we were able to increase our call volume by 300%. Because the phones were just going. And it was a simple move to route the phone number to a Google Voice number, employ their latest answering services that sound real. I mean, even at that time, 3 years ago, indiscernible from a bot.
Especially when it's such a simple task of just
leave a message.
Yeah, hi, leave a message. We'll get back to you.
That transcript would go to an email queue. That email queue would fire off invoices and job details to then be mapped on a Google Maps custom map. And then we were able to plan our routes to hit 5 or 6 things right in the same place. And so like, to me, that's intelligence. And all of that was enabled by forms of AI through natural language processing, and not necessarily LLMs.
Right.
But the intelligence in that kind of definition was like freeing up my uncle to go solve water problems.
Compartmentalize, get him doing what he's good at, so he doesn't have to worry about the admin side.
And people think of that as like a negative, right? You hear engineers always say like, well, I don't want to forget how to code that. I don't want, the AI to do this for me. But I think there's going to be things that like let that kind of intelligence go.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to need new types of intelligence, or we have a responsibility for. So yeah, I know it's not a direct answer, but that's like that lived experience of like, you employ it on all of these things that are kind of cruft to then go and do the things you care about, because there's no better feeling than making water come out of the ground. It's amazing.
That's kind of where where my answer was going as well, actually, is that there's this idea, funnily enough, about a video essay about World of Warcraft. I don't even play World of Warcraft, but anyway, where essentially we use tools in order to offload work from our brain. So, I might put notes down in my phone, and that's offloading work from my brain into the phone, into my notes app. That's my memory is now augmented by my phone and my notes app. And that kind of relates, that goes all sorts of different directions. We wear glasses to augment our vision, although none of us do, funny enough.
My contacts are in.
Okay, well, that's actually, I think, an even cooler example,
right,
an even more closely integrated example. And, you were using a whole bunch of technologies to do a whole bunch of mental offloading from you and your family. And I think that's where I see all of these sorts of intelligences and technologies coming in, is to empower people. And I know it's a bit of a trite talking point by now that, I want to use AI to empower people, not to replace people. But I really do believe that that's the most powerful thing that we can do, is to make ourselves more powerful using the technology that we have. And AI and LLMs are an interesting avenue there, because they offload what we had normally thought of as something that was very intrinsic to us. We always thought, I can offload stuff like my notes to my phone's notes app or to a pen and paper, but I can't offload the more thinky tasks.
Yeah, active thoughts.
But we're starting to be able to offload some of them to AI at this point, and I think that's really interesting ability.
Any thoughts, Hayden?
Yeah, I remember a few months ago, just explaining to a friend of mine what AI was. Like they're not super a technical person, but I mean I was just kind of explaining it from my point of view, where I mean like going through college, I took an AI class, and like large language models were not even in the curriculum. We talked a little bit about neural nets, but we talked about a lot about just agents and just being able to make like anything that's able to make a decision could be quantified as an intelligence. So like we went into a conversation of like comparing, honestly, we were comparing a lot of different animals, saying if they're intelligent or not. And like what we kind of came to the conclusion of is like, it's kind of a scale almost of like what they can do. You can't just draw a line of like where intelligence starts. I think that's kind of a ridiculous thing to try to do. I think LLMs are certainly AI, but they're not Gen AI, which is a lot of what the lay person thinks of when
AGI, I think.
AGI, AGI, but that's certainly somewhere down the line on the spectrum of I coded a Roomba bot on my very first day of computer science 101. Is that AI? I certainly think of it in some way of artificial intelligence. It's able to make decisions. It's made on a computer. It's artificial. So I think AI is definitely on a spectrum of some sorts of what is intelligence.
Yeah. And so I want to close pretty much at, this is great. We've been through time so much, but I think just maybe a bit more of an abstract thought. I do remember, so when I first immigrated to the USA, there were a lot of controversies around, because there was a lot that was changing demographically, frankly, as a lot more non-traditional minorities, et cetera, were really flocking to universities, either from immigrants or from the native, or from U.S.-born, non-traditional, populations. And the ideas were such as, do these people belong in the university? Are they intelligent enough? And, old tropes, that go back to phrenology, et cetera, would come up. And that whole idea of who's more intelligent than the other, is it determined by race? Is it, the bell curve was a famous controversial book about, a lot of social welfare systems are helping people who are not capable of being helped because they're not intelligent enough to basically to take advantage of that help. So you can imagine, what I felt about some of that stuff. But then other people started to push back with other ideas about, is intelligence just passing, a standardized test? What about emotional intelligence? What about the ability to relate to other people? What about the ability to collaborate? Not enough women in engineering. Is it because women are not capable of engineering? Is it because women are not capable of doing that mathematics, et cetera? Well, it turns out perhaps not. Perhaps the culture of engineering drives women away. And that if you have a culture of engineering that opens more avenues for different strengths of people, all of a sudden you now have room for women. Is that not intelligence? The same, we want to talk about how Bill Gates and Steve Jobs are, the most intelligent people we've ever seen because, they're geeky engineers. Well, when we are looking at modern technology, the way it's emerging in a society context, you need a lot more of the diversity of thought, opinion, approach, etc. And so to me, I've always felt like the true intelligence is that diversity of how we relate to each other and how we relate to the natural world, which, the artificial part might get there eventually, but I actually don't think we're really close on that at all, right? I mean, an LLM does not, no one's going to fall in love with an LLM, or anything else like that. And that's part of intelligence. Well, who knows? So it would, but
I think no one should fall in love with it. I already think that's unfortunately happened.
That's a good point.
We're very deep in the local space, and a lot of people use that for that very
virtual companions.
Yeah, CC.ai is like the third most popular website in the Western Hemisphere. It's like it's all Gen Alpha using it to talk to companions and fake personalities. Is that necessarily a bad thing? Maybe something to talk about in the future, but I think I'm reminded of by what you shared, Uche, of a question that I was asked a long time ago that still kind of confounds me. And as a really famous professor back at Texas A&M, and unfortunately he's passed in the past 5 years. And but Tom Reagan used to ask everybody that he taught, where do you think ideas come from? And we would ponder that question. We would try to answer it. Where do my ideas come from on this? How do I rationalize myself? How do I give context to my ideas in such a way that people can understand them? And so when you start at that root, it's a really difficult question to answer for LLMs in the same way as it is a difficult question for us to answer. Right? When you take the magnitude of all the calculations that it's doing, and then it spits out the next token, and the next, and then all of a sudden there's a coherent sentence there.
Right.
And there's almost the same kind of mental sort of task that we do where we intuitively respond, well, this idea came from looking at my family or looking at art, or, this idea came from this story and this person. And so I find it just the act of being able to ponder where my ideas come from is intelligence to me. Mm-hmm. And then until an AI is truly able to sort of self-assess,
look within,
I don't know if it's there. To your point, I don't think we're anywhere near that kind of capability. We're contriving GraphRag, knowledge graph, citation graph to do those things, but that's still us.
It's still a human supervisor in there. So so I think it's just interesting to think that some of these elements, it could be, sort of romance and other human connections that artificial intelligence sort of infiltrates into intelligence. But I do think, beyond the ability to churn logic or the ability to pass standardized tests, I remember a lot of people were blown away when GPT-4 was able to pass the LSAT, et cetera. Yeah. Beyond that, I think there's something...
That was the first time everybody was like...
Yeah, exactly. But I think beyond that, there's something fundamental to life, not even necessarily intelligent life, but all the way up, through the chain of organized matter, through regular life to intelligent life, that we're just going to have to continue to reckon and figure out how it builds into this picture of artificial intelligence. And that's the DIY. Let's not let it happen to us. Let's be part of that journey. So absolutely. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us in, this first, AI DIY journey. And I hope you enjoy it, you who are watching and you who will be watching. So
Awesome. And thanks so much for moderating today. It was great.
my pleasure
To offer.
conversation.
Awesome.
Okay, thanks everybody.